G'day, I'm Guy Allen, welcome to Allmoto. Today we're talking about one of Kawasaki's legendary models, the GPZ 900R. It was first shown to media in 1983, launched for the 1984 model year. Got some pretty early success at the Isle of Man in production racing, and went on to be a formidable competitor around the world. Now, Kawasaki had this bike on sale for an incredible amount of time. In Australia, it was available from 84 through to 91, over which time the price went from around $5,100 to a little over $8,000. But it lasted in the market in other parts of the world for considerably longer and well over a decade. So in some places, it was being sold alongside the, for example, ZX7R, which was the new generation sports bike that took over that cutting edge role. Bikes such as the GPZ 1000RX, which was based on the 900, and then of course the first ZX10 and the ZZR 1100. It actually sold side by side in showrooms along all of those machines, depending on which market you're talking about. Quite an incredible performance that it lasted for so long. And I think part of the secret behind that was it was actually a well-developed bike from day one. It had some of the fashion items that were required in the mid-80s. For example, Grand Prix bikes were wearing 16-inch front wheels, so therefore the road bikes had to have them. That was a short-lived fashion, and in Kawasaki's case the early bikes had them, but it did switch over to a 17-inch front rim. For its time, it was quite a respectable handler. It was probably better than average, and even though 16-inch front wheel bikes had a reputation for being a little flighty, particularly through bumpy turns, this was one of the better developed ones from that point of view. Braking for its era was good. These days you'd only find it acceptable. Performance was very good. We're talking about a bike that was capable of 150 mile an hour or somewhere in the region of 250 kilometres an hour. Now, despite all those performance credentials, they were a remarkably flexible machine, and this is something that's easy to forget about mid-80s motorcycles. With a 22-litre tank, it had decent range, something I got to prove when I bought one out of Alice Springs in Central Australia and rode it 2,300 kilometres home to Melbourne. This was a good illustration of just how capable these things are. Kawasaki's basic engine architecture was 4 cylinders, 16 valves. Cam drive was quite distinctive. It was on one side of the head, fed by carburetors. No huge surprises. Double overhead cam, of course. Rock solid engineering. That engine went on, in fact, all the way through GPZ 1000RX, ZX10 and even ZZR 1100. Now, the thing that surprised me about this bike, and I'd forgotten it had been some years if not decades since I'd ridden one, is it was a particularly good bike to travel on. Sure, it was still fast. It would sit on 100 mile an hour all day if you asked it to, but it was surprisingly comfortable and coped with the distance without any dramas. Handling by current standards probably feels a little bit gothic, as does the braking. You need to allow for the fact that we're now getting towards it being a 40-year-old motorcycle. There's a lot of very typical Kawasaki things about it for that era. Engine is a bit cold-blooded, likes a bit of extra time to warm up. It swings through the turns, it's got medium speed steering. The suspension, as long as it's kept up to spec and is in reasonable condition, does the job okay. Nowhere near as precise as a modern bike, but for a potential classic, it's more than acceptable. One of the things that has me curious about these bikes is a lot of commentators over the years, and I've been guilty of this as well, have said this is a legendary and important motorcycle in Kawasaki's lineup. Therefore, it should be in big demand as a classic bike. Now, we've seen the prices rise and fall a little over recent years, but not really go as far as I might have expected. When it comes to care and feeding of these things, there's no big surprises. They have a reputation for being reasonably robust. High mileage, you'd be checking the cam chain tensioner, and you might be considering a top-end freshen up. The good news is that while it's fiddly to get in there, once you have the tappet cover off, you have screw and lock nut adjustment for the valve lash, which is terrific. It's comparatively straightforward to do compared to shims. No other surprises, typical liquid cooled bike, keep the fluids fresh, keep an eye on the thing and you should be okay. These days if you're a collector you'd probably pick up a really good one for mid-teens. If it were me I would be chasing the A1 or A2, but preferably the A1. The first model is the one that has real significance for people. These things may no longer be Top Gun in the performance or even handling stakes, but they're still a thoroughly enjoyable ride and a bit of a surprise packet. I could think of much worse ways to spend your money. The real trick will be finding one that's in good original condition that hasn't been messed around with. Happy hunting.